Hi everyone, it's Adriaan Groenewald here. Welcome to ThinkME, a self-discovery ecosystem. It's wonderful to be with you. We're going to help leaders through this platform to discover their best and authentic self and remain true to that individual. And it is about that, as leaders, if we don't find ourselves and remain true to ourselves, we cannot be authentic leaders. This is part of ThinkLead, which is a global leadership ecosystem. I've got a very special guest with me today, Angelique du Toit, all the way from Italy. She does live in South Africa, but found herself on lockdown in Italy during the worst time that they experienced. And we'll touch on that a little bit. But Angelique du Toit is an author, a speaker. She encourages people to live with a greater purpose, to find themselves. And she's exactly involved very intricately, personally, but also in her writing as an author and speaker in this sort of theme and this topic of how do I discover myself, who am I, and how important is that. But today we're going to get a little bit more personal with her too, because she's had a very growing, tough, interesting, exciting, I was trying to find the one word earlier, a year. The last year or so has been just incredible for her. But Angelique, welcome.
Thank you so much, Adriaan. Always a pleasure.
So you're in the north of Italy at the moment. You thought you were just visiting there for a little bit, and then you ended up there in lockdown during that period where the whole world was focusing on Italy. Now it's a little bit in the background, of course. But what's it been like?
Well, it's been a wonderful journey, actually, Italy in itself, in that we've been skiing here for the last 16 years. And we always used to say very tongue-in-cheek, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get a property, just to, something just to be part of this beautiful part of the world. And lo and behold, in 2015, that vision became a reality. And we found a really ancient and dilapidated home. I don't know if any of your viewers have seen Under the Tuscan Sun, where she finds that really old, dilapidated home in Tuscany. Well, we did the same thing. And it took a lot of imagination and a lot of courage. But we decided to invest in Italy and build a regional home. It's called a modern mountain house, which we absolutely love. And so we have been here as in, permanent resident status, although I still live in South Africa, since 2016. And so that's been a wonderful part of it. And it was ultimately our plan to, when we were 90 and 100, to come and retire here. However, life, as we know, can be unpredictable. And despite your best laid plans, despite your greatest visions, despite what you believe, and regardless of how strong your faith may be, life is unpredictable, as we've seen the world over. And it's only when we go back with what I call the privilege of hindsight that you see how every part of the puzzle is actually already there. We just need to confidently walk through it when it happens, and deal with all of the things in us. So the reason I found myself here at the beginning of the year was because in December, on the 31st of December, living with a very healthy, a very fit, and a very strategic, brilliant businessman, wonderful father, amazing husband, I suddenly found myself being a widow at an age much younger than I ever anticipated in my life. It was never part of my plan. It was never part of my vision. And so I had to come to Italy to register Ernest's death. And I had planned just to be here for 6 weeks. And in the 2 weeks before I was due to leave, lockdown came. And so I'm still here.
Incredible. So for those who don't see that full picture, Angelique and her husband were very involved with a business that a lot of us would know here in South Africa, and then decided to move on from there. And she's explained part of it now. And surprisingly, very surprisingly, Ernest passed away, and not many months after that, you stuck in lockdown in Italy. So as an author of life and as a student of life, a speaker, the last 6 months must have been a real life experiment for you in a way. Did you write it all? Because you've written a few books. We can mention them just now. You've written a few books up until this point in your life, Angelique. I mean, it's just a amazing life that you've led. You've experienced ups and downs and surprises and everything that life can offer. So have you been writing?
I have been writing, but it was very interesting. After Ernest passed away, I found the writing process very difficult to get back into. And I think it's because one had to excavate now at a much deeper level. But what I would like to weave into this is that when we look back on our lives, if we are astute enough to be aware and in the moment, life gives us many clues along the way. And this is pretty much what I'm podcasting about at the moment, is because podcasts in this time of lockdown have become hugely in demand. And so we all know we're kind of going online, and that's part of connecting the clues as well. As you know, does lockdown mean lack of productivity? Does lockdown mean you lie down and do nothing for 6 months or whatever it is? And the answer is no, but sometimes it causes us to find new ways of doing things that we know work. But I'd like to just backtrack a little bit on your question to 2019, probably around March. At the beginning of 2019, I had a very full schedule. My diary was back to back. I was booked for conferences, speaking events, many different things, book launches, all sorts of things that were in my diary. And Ernest said to me, why don't we just take 2019 with a bit of a different view this year? We've both worked really hard for decades. We've built successful businesses. Why don't we take a sabbatical and just do things differently? Everything inside me, because I am a productive personality, screamed at the idea of, no, I've got a full diary. What was very interesting was when I made the decision to take my foot off the accelerator, cancel all of the things that I had been involved in, I found my own health impacted. I found my health being somewhat challenged. And I thought, well, maybe your body's giving you signals that it is time for a sabbatical. So both Ernest and I decided we would do 2019 differently. Adriaan, the beauty of this is that I could never have known. And we'd made a decision that on the 31st of December, the sabbatical would end in 2020. We would welcome the year. I would never have known that on the 31st of December, on an ordinary day, like every other day, Ernest took our Cocker Spaniel for a run. And I said to him that morning, don't you just want to have breakfast with us before you go? Because all of the children were visiting from the different countries and places that they live in, and we had a full house. And he said, I'm just going to go for a run. I'll join you when I get back. He went for a run, and Ernest never calls while he's out on a run. And I instantly thought, something's happened to the dog or something's not right. And he just said, I think you should come and fetch me. I'm not feeling so well. My son ran to the car, picked him up, and he said he'll be fine. So he had a shower because I was going to take him to the hospital. I could just see that he was not feeling great. I could see that his color was not right. And he said to me it felt like he had a bit of indigestion. So he went into the dressing room to change, and I just felt to stay very, very close. And it was in that moment that he reached up to try and hold onto the top of his cupboard and just collapsed. And my son gave him CPR. We called Discovery, and they were amazing. This woman talked him through the process of CPR, which was such a blessing because it actually gave us an opportunity once he had been transferred to the hospital and he was in the ER. we were able to say goodbye. But it was the shock of my life. It was devastating. And I'm so thankful that I didn't allow my ambition, I didn't allow my productive personality to not hear in 2019, because I could never have known what was going to happen on the 31st of December. And yet I could now release Ernest with the joy of knowing that we spent a year together, of great connection and great celebration of the fruit of our labor. I think that's what was so wonderful. But he's deeply missed.
Yeah.
And especially in this home, because we built this home together. We designed every stone, every piece of wood. It was just a beautiful project that we could do together.
Yeah,
so getting back to the writing, it took me a while to say, can I write from this depth of pain? And I think it's made my writing more authentic than ever, because I love books that I know come from a person's experience as opposed to mere theory. And I do feel that my writing's taken on a different dimension.
Yeah, and I had the privilege of knowing Ernest fairly well over the years, met him a few times, interviewed him a few times, often with you, or maybe most of the times with you. And yeah, he was a very authentic man. He came from being a very tough, autocratic leader to discovering himself and becoming a much more empathetic, authentic leader. So he's one of those good examples. In his personal life, obviously you would have seen that. In his business life, in his career, in just the way he carried himself, he progressed and became a better human being. And then, of course, you're even more so in that field of writing about it, maybe more than he did, and maybe he was moving in that direction. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's amazing how that painful moment comes in such a joyous setting, with the family around, and he's taking the dog for a jog, and we're all having breakfast. And it comes on the back of, as you say, spending the better part of a year just on sort of a sabbatical. So a lot of good in there, but the pain is there. And then the experience of, as you say, then taking yourself deeper inside and then writing from that place. So Angelique, on the back of that, and then the whole lockdown experience where you're in Italy, and as human beings, our biggest weakness is we forget things, and maybe it's a great strength too. You know, if we had to remember everything in great detail, we'll not do a lot of things because we'll remember the pain. But it was very traumatic being in Italy. I mean, Italy was just going through such pain just a few months ago. So you were there. You were actually in that region, and you're still there, and you may be there for another 6+ months. So with that backdrop, I'm interested in, and say anything you want, but I'm interested in how you got to know yourself. And then let's take that conversation further to almost more the impact of that on leadership. When you get to know yourself, you've seen that in your life and your former husband's life. Late husband's a better word than former husband. You've seen it in your speaking and engaging leaders. So I want us to go down that route of what it means when you discover your true self. But how did you discover yourself? I think you have, and it's probably still a journey. You are still discovering yourself. Of course, it's a lifelong journey.
Adriaan, I think in the discussions you and I have had over the years, you know that I came from a difficult background. With no high school education, went to 13 schools between grade 1 and standard 6, had to be working at 14, was really, on the back foot of life is how I considered myself. Didn't have in my thinking the opportunity that everybody had. What on earth was I going to do with my life? So much of that over the years caused me to start digging pretty deep, maybe a lot earlier than most people do, because desperation forces decisions. And we can either, through that process of desperation, go the inspirational route or go the route that works against you. And so what are the routes that work against us? And I know that this is part of the route that I went, was to go into performance mode. If I could perform properly and I could perform well, then I could outperform those people who had a greater privilege than me. On the other hand, I went the inspiration route. What can I learn? Who can I learn from? Who could I role model to help me along this journey of life? And it's one of the reasons that I do what I do, because I met a very significant woman at the age of 21 where my life was in shambles. It was falling apart. And this woman intercepted my life, and she showed me things that were on the inside of me, I believe that were God inspired, where she was able just to put her finger on and say, the reason you're so angry is because you're carrying unforgiveness. The reason your body is ailing is because you've got so much trapped on the inside of you that you need to release. The reason you feel like you've got this confused thinking and that your stress levels are so high at such a young age is because you are just overloaded with things that you need to confront. And I believe that that is one of the first steps in finding yourself, is because what we don't confront has the ability to control us. And it controls us at a deeply subconscious level. We don't even know that we're being controlled by all of these negative emotions, by past patterns, by past experiences. And then, you find that somebody hates their parent, and yet it's not long before they start acting just like their parent. And the reason that happens is because the issue is still unresolved in their own life. They haven't given themselves the opportunity to confront what needs to be dealt with. Therefore, out of the anger, out of the unforgiveness, out of the bitterness, they go and do exactly the same thing to their children. It works in leadership. It works somebody who's leading an organization. I've had a recent experience just here in Europe to watch that pattern unfold of a very autocratic leader in a startup company that is growing at an exponential rate. But there are issues that if he wants to really be a sterling leader, he's going to have to confront the performance issues, the anger issues, the how you speak to your staff issues. And so it all goes back to, if it's going to be, it has to start with me. And that is why everything I write about is internal transformation for external impact. We can project for a while, Adriaan, but the truth is the real us will come out sooner or later. And that's what I love about the work that you do. It's getting to the authenticity of who we are, because I believe that a successful life is an authentic life. A successful life is a life of integrity. And integrity, being integrous, means I start with myself first. I've got to explore what is on the inside of me. So I was very privileged at the age of 21 to have somebody give me a platform to say, all right, let's deal with these matters step by step, process by process. And then all of these years later, it was revisited again with a grief and trauma counselor that I saw. Because shortly after Ernest's death, I found myself in lockdown in Italy, not being able to, not even, aside from technology, not even have a touch, not even have a person close up to me. And Ernest and I had this very warm, very affectionate relationship. No contact with people. For 90 days, I was in total and complete isolation. The only time I could go out was fully masked, fully gloved, to the store, down the road. You had to be in and out and come straight back home. the cops roam up and down the road, and they would put on their siren saying, it's time for you to get back. So I was confronted with, who are you really in this time?
Mm.
Who are you really? And again, I started to experience some things that I experienced at 21, where I thought, I can feel the bodily impact. I can feel it within me that I'm being negatively impacted by trauma, by isolation, by grief. And my daughter referred me to a wonderful therapist who's based in Johannesburg. And we had some Skype meetings. And she once again got me back to, this is really who you are. What we're dealing with here is just one event. Just one event. And if we can deal with the event, the real you can come back out and can really flourish again. And that's exactly what happened. She took me through a process of going back in time to that day, the 31st of December, and making me realize that I'm living in this day. And whether I'm alone or not was not the key.
Mm.
The reality is, you can be with you, and you can be with you very comfortably. But that only comes when you love who you are authentically.
Mm. So I find myself wondering, if you think of leaders, you don't know what you don't know very often. So taking it back to leadership for a moment, when you're at the top of your game, you're under huge pressure, and we know under pressure, be it through grief or isolation or financial trauma, or we sometimes default back to our 21-year-old person, to our weaknesses, or those things that we have confronted in life before. But if I've had a fairly traumatic background, okay, then it kind of makes sense that you have to confront those demons in your life, and you have to confront those situations in order to move forward. If someone feels like they had a fairly happy background in a home, mom and dad always stayed together, they didn't divorce, just to use an ordinary example, and I had a fairly happy childhood, and then went and studied and moved forward and became a manager and a senior manager and CEO, or whatever it is. Does the same process apply? Can that person say, well, I don't have any really traumatic issues in my childhood that I need to confront. I don't think I have a big grudges towards my parents, or are we saying, hold on, this process applies to you just on another level?
I don't believe that any human is above life experience. We all have different things to face. It's the same pie, different gravy. So we've all had different backgrounds, we've all had different starts, we've all had different experiences. I have known that some people who would have so-called had the perfect life are confronting things that I've never had to confront in my life. And what is it usually caused by? The choices that we make. Mm. So, in making choices as a leader, it goes back for me, to integrity. It doesn't matter what past we've had, how perfect or unperfect or imperfect it may have been. What choices are we making for the good of humanity? What choices are we making for the good of our organizations? What choices are we making? This particular executive that I'm thinking of here, he's had a very privileged life. But in his ambition, he's forgetting that it's about the people. He's forgetting that it's not just about exponentially growing an organization so that it can just be a wow factor, which is important. But who is growing that business for you? Who are your collaborators? Who are your team? And if you lose your team, what have you gained? And so that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with his past, but maybe it has much to do with his future. So I think it goes a lot back to personality, how we view our relationships with each other, how we care for one another. I know you and I have had many discussions in the times gone by about, for me, leadership is relationship before function. It really is relationship before function. Otherwise, you look at your people like factors of production, and people don't want to be treated like that. And with the advent of technology and the digital world that we're living in, business is being done in a different way. It's being done, much is being said much more quickly. So it's being more felt than told on a much quicker scale than it was before. And so it brings us back to that level of accountability. I think it's dangerous to get to a place that says, well, I've had it all just so perfect, and I can do as I please. We are responsible for the people that we're leading, and we've got to find that substance within us, despite whatever it is that our perhaps often inflated opinion of ourselves may be. I know I had to come off that balloon because it gets popped many times in life. And if I could just go back to the fact that you raised Ernest as a very demanding leader, and I can tell you, when we first started working together, he was just concerned about growth. And it was only over the years that he began to open another dimension of his life. And when he really found that my purpose, whilst he might be very gifted as a business person, as a strategist, his purpose in life became very real to him when he understood the people he was leading. And the beauty of that, Adriaan, was when he made that transition. That is when the profits took care of themselves. That is when the businesses grew exponentially. That is when we were doing far more financially with less effort. That is the beauty of that.
So, Angelique, I guess what we're saying here is, your opinion is, and I concur, that no matter what your background is, no matter what your perception is of how you grew up and how you unfolded over the years, what do you say you do? You say you work on internal transformation for
external impact.
External impact. So the more I transform internally, the deeper inside I go to discover who I am and to almost uncover my best self, the more I will cause external impact.
Exactly. Because for me, the starting point of life is that we're all created in the image of God. God created us. He handcrafted us. How is it that there are over 7.5 billion people on planet Earth, but there's only one you? Well, there's only one you because you were designed with a purpose. There's nobody else that can fill your part of the jigsaw. There's nobody else that can do what you do the way that you do it. And so we owe it to our Creator to be the best that we can be. And that takes some excavation, because we're born into a difficult world. We're born into a world with challenges. We're born into a world that somehow gives us the opposite message to the fact that we're created in the image of God. And whether we are a leader or whether we are a child, we are all created in the image of God. And it's in the process of life that we need to yield ourselves to the revealing, to the unveiling of who we have really been created to be. Because we are spirit, we are soul, and we're body. And to take any one of those away is like trying to sit on a two-legged stool. So the spiritual part of us is that part that acknowledges, you know what, there is greatness within me. And that's not an arrogant statement. There is greatness because we're created in the image of God. The second thing is that our soul is made up of our mind, our will, and our emotions. And if those three aren't functioning correctly, then it puts pressure on our spirit and our body. And then, of course, if our body is in a state of disrepair, it doesn't matter how brilliant our leadership or our dreams or anything are, we cannot live into the fullness of what it is that we want to live into. Because those dreams can be, fabulous, but you need a body to get you there. And so I believe that in the fullness of humanity, of the way we've been created to be, we can't ignore neither spirit, soul, or body. And it's then incumbent, particularly on a leader who is responsible for multitudes often in an organization, is where is my mind? Where is my thinking? What am I focused on? What is taking my attention? What are my stress levels like? What are my emotions? Am I largely angry? Am I largely frustrated? Do I worry? Because all of those things impact your emotions. And then your will, your will is central to life. I mean, if we really think about it, Adriaan, God took a huge risk giving mankind free will, because look how we can use it to the detriment of mankind. We can use it to the detriment of our own lives by having, addictions, wrong behaviors, by allowing certain things into our lives that damage our lives. Now you take all of that into a leadership role. You drag that into work every day. You're wondering why your body's feeling fatigued, why you can't get it together, why you're living on coffee and nicotine and whatever else that you might be living on. And it's just doesn't make for great, sound, solid leadership, because through all of that, you're trying to filter a way forward for your organization. But it first comes with leading yourself. If I'm leading myself, I can confidently lead others. Does that mean it's all going to be perfect decision making, perfect, right on time? Not always. But I find we have a better opportunity at leading a great organization when we are more confident, comfortable, at peace within ourselves. Peace plays a huge role in leadership for me.
Angelique, obviously I can steer with certain questions this conversation in one of three directions. One is a direction that appeases every single person, whether you believe there's a God or not. So let's kind of go in that direction of how do I find myself without that key component. The other one is a question of individuals out there who sense that they are created in the image of a greater being, a God. Okay, so they believe in that basic principle that so many millions and billions believe in. But then there are those who believe that, but never really explore what that means. So let's just leave those for a moment who don't even believe there's a God. Okay, they do sense there's something great. Okay, but let's park that. Then there are those who believe there is a God, and yes, if you push them a bit harder, they'll say, "Yeah, I believe I was created in His image." And then I ask, okay, those who believe that, have they really explored what it means when you say you're created in the image of God? And what impact does that question and answering that question have on me discovering who my true self is?
I'm going to go back to the point that I believe people change, either for inspiration or through desperation. So if I have what I call the Doris Day theory approach to life, of whatever will be, que sera, and there are multitudes of people who live their lives like that, is, well, I'm born, I live, I die, whether, I am a clerk for the rest of my life or whether I run a nation. We'll just see how it all unfolds. I mean, you hear many people say, whatever will be, will be. I don't agree with that personally, because I believe that we're given a brain. I believe that we're given gifts. I believe that we have talents and skills and desires that give us the privilege of creating the future we desire to live into. And so whether you believe in God, don't believe in God, or sit on the fence, should not affect the fact that you get to a stage, surely somewhere in your life, that says there's got to be more to life than this, where you know that you have a skill set that maybe somebody else doesn't have. And how can you best apply it? How can you be the best you can be? And for me, it goes back to my belief system. I believe that I have been inspired to go up higher because I know beyond any shadow of doubt that I am created by a wonderful God who loves me, who sees my value, knows my worth, and has a purpose for me. For those who don't, what is purpose then for you? What is it that you want to achieve? What is it that you desire to achieve? And how does your longer term sense of purpose fit into that? So if I take somebody who perhaps, let's say, is depressed with life and says, well, nothing I try is successful, or I've tried this, my businesses have closed down, I seem to have a pattern of unsuccessful outcomes. Well, so did I also had a pattern of unsuccessful outcomes. But my desire for life, my desire for discovering who I really was created to be, spirit, soul, and body, was the key driver in my life to say there's got to be more than this. And I've walked this journey of self-discovery since I was 14 because I was forced. Desperation forces you to make a decision. So my heart is sore for people who live in that Doris Day theory of whatever will be, because there is so much more to life than that. For those who know that there is a greater purpose, I celebrate, because the world needs purpose-driven people. The world needs people who've got the chutzpah, the gumption, the get up and go, the resilience, despite what life has thrown at us, to say, I want to make a difference to this world. I can see a world in need. I can see many in that valley of decision. To your point, is it this or is it that? Do I do this or do I do that? What is purpose? And it takes people like you and people like me to be able to throw out these seeds into the soil of humanity and trust that they fall on good soil. There's that wonderful parable about the sower that went out to sow seed. And even though the sun scorched some seed, and even though the weeds choked some seed, and even though there was seed that didn't produce fruit, the sower never stopped sowing. And so I believe for those who see their greater purpose in life, never stop sowing, because there are multitudes who need the seed of what you're sowing in their soil. So for me, it goes back to a belief system about yourself, about a higher being, about knowing that there's much more to us than we've ever dreamed of. And personally, I think we settle for too little. I think there is much more for us to be, to explore, and to influence than we've ever dreamed of.
Angelique, what would be some key questions? Because I don't think someone can just sit back and say, what do I want to achieve in life? What do I want to do in this life? What is my purpose? Without digging deep and discovering who they are. Because that could change dramatically. When I just ask that question without digging deep, then I can be swayed by everyone around me in terms of what should be my purpose. It should be to be a global entrepreneur. It should be to be a CEO, or to be the top politician, or should be title driven. I could easily be fooled by that. But if I go dig deep in, I might just realize my purpose is none of that. But anyway, just in the last few minutes as we close this down, what are some key questions that I need to navigate me towards knowing who I am before I decide what I want to do with my life? I'm already in a leadership position. I'm a CEO, or I'm a manager, or I'm just running my little business, or I'm a school teacher or principal. So I'm already making a difference in some way, no doubt, of my family. But before I really take it to up a notch. And I realized, okay, I want to go transform inside. What questions do I need in order to get there? And must I answer to get there? And I will never get there without answering those questions.
The first question I would ask is, am I deeply okay with myself? And then I would start my decision tree. If I'm not deeply okay with myself, what do I need to change? And if I need to change something, how am I going to change it? And when am I going to start? Because there is not one human being that is not or shouldn't be in the constant process of change. So am I deeply okay with myself? Can I look at myself in the mirror and say, everything about you makes me feel content? Or is there something that I need to tweak, something that I need to challenge, something that I need to revisit? Am I living with a deep integrity? Am I being faithful? Am I being loyal? Am I doing everything that I do with excellence? Is there something in me that causes me to be excited about who I am? Am I joyous about who I am? Do I have peace about who I am? Am I being true to me? Because if I'm being true to me, I can be true to you. And you know, the one thing we resist more than anything else in our life is change. But change is not going to come until we first ask these deeply probing questions. Am I deeply okay with myself? Because when all is said and done, is I cannot give what I do not have. I cannot give what I do not have.
So let's just maybe end with this, that leader, he or she who answers the question immediately yes. So if they go and sit in their home, their holiday home somewhere, and they say, am I deeply, just get the
okay with
okay,
myself. Am
with
I
myself?
deeply at peace? Yes.
Okay, so if I then answer yes, I am, it could be that I am, it could be that I don't know what I don't know. So because if I had to go ask the people that individual leads, they might say, no, Adriaan does not strike me as someone who's deeply okay with himself, because I just see the way he leads. You know, I don't feel happy under his leadership. So that could be a different outcome. But let's say I'm stepping in a trap where I say, yes, I am, because everything around me shows me I am. I don't even know how to listen to myself. I listen to the signs out there. I drive a beautiful car, home, lovely family. It seems happy, you know, things seem fine. What could be the trap that I've stepped in, or not? So let's say there's a part that it's fine. There are obviously people who can say, yes, I am at peace with myself, and that's great, and then go down that journey. But those leaders, I'm not going to say Trump, because I think Trump would say I am, as an example. But what would you say to them? So if you do say yes, what's the tree from there?
If you're deeply okay with yourself, you should be deeply okay enough to ask those around you for their opinion. So as a leader, I would do a 360. I would start with my family, because what does it matter if you save the whole world, but your family thinks that you're just a fool? So I would start with my spouse, I would start with my children, and I would say, do you see something in me that you see needs to change, or that hurts you, that offends you? I would do it with my staff. That's risky. It's vulnerable. But if you are deeply okay with yourself, you should be able to say, I want to be in the process of change. Therefore, your opinion matters, because you say, I listen to what is out there. Well, are you prepared to listen to what really matters? Because we know, we've all been in business. We know corridor chatter. We know what goes through the grapevine. And you so often hear, he shouldn't be a leader. He shouldn't be a manager. He shouldn't be a boss, or she shouldn't be. And yet, if we can really hear from those people, and we are prepared for that, it could give us a completely different perspective. And I think what you say is very valuable, because we can be beguiled by our own filters and we can think we're just absolutely fabulous. But it will also go back to what Ernest used to say time and time and time again, and that is, you could be a water walker. There will be 1/3 of people who will think you're brilliant, 1/3 of people who will think indifferent, can be Adriaan, Bob, Frank, doesn't matter, and can be 1/3 of people who will think we're just fools. And all of that is okay. But what is really important is, if I'm deeply okay with me, am I prepared to find out if others are deeply okay with me? And some may be and some may not, but you will get the truth one way or another, which again brings us back to, you'll change through inspiration or desperation. The inspiration will be if people say, you know, we really love working with you, you inspire us, you're wonderful. What's going to happen? You're going to want to do that more. If people just say, worst leader in the world, hopefully that desperation will bring about change.
Angelique, thank you. I mean, that's, if I just for myself almost summarize, that's such a wonderful test. If I answer yes, I am deeply okay with myself, then a good test would be, are you willing to go to those nearest to you, who know you best, and then circle out and ask them to give you honest feedback about you. If you're not willing to do that, then you're probably not okay with yourself, so you've been trapped. You've got to go deeper. But even there, if I then am willing to go out, you've balanced that very well. And that's the polarity of leadership, is the fact that I could honestly be okay with myself. I could be very comfortable with myself, and I could be an honest person in that space. But I cannot provide for other people's insecurities, who feel insecure in my presence just because they are insecure in themselves. So there is that percentage of people who even if you are a person who's okay with yourself, they're not okay with themselves, and therefore the way that they evaluate you is not accurate and fair. But that's another conversation. You've given us wonderful insight in this conversation of exactly what ThinkME is about. It's a self-discovery ecosystem. And with this sort of conversation and this kind of insight from you, Angelique, it's going to hopefully make a difference in the world. I think we're moving forward, tell me if you agree, into a future, it's always been this way, but we're moving into a future where individuals are going to be under enormous pressure, economically, emotionally, spiritually. Everything is going to another level, and therefore knowing myself is becoming more and more important.
I would agree with you 100%. This lockdown has shown me that we can live in a world of over 7 billion people, but who are you in isolation? Who are you on your own? And do you have the grit? Do you have the resilience? Do you have that stick-out ability? Do you have the mental presence to be able to push through no matter what? Adriaan, I believe great shaking is coming upon the world. I think everything that can be shaken is going to be shaken. And it's going to take a lot of internal locus of control, a lot of faith, a lot of grit to be able to stand. And as you know, my one book is called Standing Tall in a Falling World. I think it was written very prophetically for a time such as this, which is the title of my podcasts. It's the theme that I feel so strongly right now, is that if ever we've needed personal development, if ever we've needed to grow up on the inside, if ever we've needed to guard our minds, our eyes, what we're hearing, be very, very careful what we're speaking, because our words create our worlds, that if ever there was a time that we needed to mature, to develop, to grow up, to have an influence, to be courageous, it is now. It is for a time such as this. And it's as if we're being shaken so that the unshakable remains. And what is the unshakable going to be? It's going to be those who are just steadfast in the ability to influence and to carry followers through, to carry people through, no matter what. What I've loved about the season is just watching how leadership has naturally emerged as people have reached out to help each other and to inspire and to influence. I mean, the technology in this digital era that we're in is a wonderful platform to encourage each other. And so that's why I count it such a privilege to be part of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Angelique du Toit, inspirational speaker, author, helping people find their purpose, all the way from Italy. And I'm sitting here next to Kruger National Park, from two beautiful parts of the world. But we're in lockdown in some way or shape or form, and we are hoping to help others discover themselves. And that's ThinkME, a self-discovery ecosystem, part of ThinkLead, a global leadership ecosystem. We appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we can have more conversations like this. All the best.
Thank you so much. To you too. Bye.